The Restoration Village, the restoration of heaven on earth through the revitalization of the African village concept. The concepts of the restoration of the African village are born out of an African godly perspective. That is, they are not founded upon any particular religion, but rather from a definite set of principles, spiritual principles that are in harmony with God. These principles become the building blocks of life and the keys for the maintenance of the planet for the benefit of all living beings. I pray that they can form the starting point for a new beginning for Africa and our people by providing the inspiration for thinking in that direction. We should not see Africa as being underdeveloped, but as being miraculously preserved by God to become the center for producing sound leadership of the human family, providing the light for a new ecologically sound social order. Therefore, we are compelled to not only raise questions about the failed direction of the past, but also to chart the course for confronting the problems of today and inspire a new direction for the future. It has been my experience that the key to our success is in assuring that our objectives and the means for obtaining them reflect a commitment to remain in harmony with the laws of God. That means that our efforts are designed to prolong, maintain, and sustain the well-being of righteous man and the earth. Considering the magnitude and comprehensive nature of the deception that has brought us to this point, we are well aware that to change is no minor undertaking, but we are not discouraged. We understand that except men inspired of God accept the challenge of forming a new world in harmony with God, life and living, it simply will not be. The decisions that confront us are, in most cases, not easy ones. They are the decisions that will determine if our future generations will have a place on the planet Earth. The planet, as evidenced by the unprecedented occurrences of earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and other phenomena, has utterly rejected contemporary man's position. Actually, the great majority of ecological crises threatening the continent and the globe stem from the same underlying cause, the undisciplined Euro-American contemporary society, which is guilty of polluting and wantonly destroying the Earth's ecosystems. The industrialized society of the Northern Hemisphere are using, by some estimates, more than 90% of the Earth's natural resources. This relatively recent and dramatic change in mankind's relationship to Earth, dating back no more than 500 years, has led to the collision between industrial civilization and the ecological systems of the planet. Consider the following statement made by environmental scientist Samir Abu El-Hajj of the Center for Environmental and Occupational Health Science at the Bir Zayed University in Israel. He makes the following comments. Today in the Jordan Valley, the excessive use of pesticides have tremendously increased production costs to the point where the crops can no longer be grown and marketed profitably. Herbicide residues in the soil might be at such very high levels that crops cannot even be successfully grown in the future. We that are in fact striving to save our most precious earth must not perceive the condition of the earth as being separate from the state of mind that is governing it. Remember, everything begins with a thought. Only afterwards is substance manifested. Since we agree that man's mind poses the primary threat to all life, including his own, we must also indict the institutions that trained, for in the final analysis, men are simply doing what they have been taught. It is essential that we understand that a demented mind has created an entire value system which emphasizes personal wealth above national sanity. Wherefore, if we are to succeed in this epic struggle to save the earth, the individualistic ambitions of the overdeveloped nations to attain more wealth must be resisted and subordinated for the benefit of the whole. The truth is, blessings or curses are each the fruit, the results of the works of those upon whom they fall. Thereby, in the final analysis, man either blesses or curses himself. The whole to which we refer is the whole human family, whose quality of life is being adversely affected by incorrect decisions made by the developed nations. The majority of the world's populace are victims by chance, not choice. Lands of the majority have become the dumping grounds of the minority. For example, industrialized nations are unable to dispose of the massive amounts of waste they are generating and are shipping this often toxic debris to lesser developed countries. However, the non-compromising law of relativity reminds us of the resilient nature of the earth. To continuously destroy the balance of the ecosystem while simultaneously subjugating nature for the sake of profit or material greed leads all of mankind down the path of self-destruction. Because nature's ultimate resilience has but one recourse, and that is to preserve itself. We now must put forth a new plan that can find acceptance among all of the ecosystems upon which our lives depend for survival. Our power cannot be manifested by trying to change the fundamental natural laws that govern us, but by developing a high level of consciousness of their existence and how to function in harmony with them. Otherwise, our continued violation of these natural laws will inevitably lead to more and more natural disasters. Our power will come through a spiritual rejuvenation, not an industrial or technological revolution. My faith in you is evidenced by my attempt to quicken your acceptance of reality, causing you to spring forth into full and perfect life. All things flow from Yah, the Almighty, creator of all things. In the Genesis, the first beings were created in his image and likeness in a land called Eden, paradise. Adam, the Yah kind, represented the completion of creation, initiating what I refer to as the Adamic civilization. Prophetically, Africa, or better yet, Eden, and her people are now the focus for the fate of the world. As it is written, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. I define this to convey that the people first created in the image and likeness of the Most Holy, charged to carry out his divine will and maintain divine order on earth, have now become the last in a chaotic, evil world, and are now being called forth to lead the restoration of heaven on earth. The work to be done now in Eden, Africa, must build on revived African traditional values, lifestyles, and cultural patterns inherited as the Genesis ideal of a harmonious life with the Creator. That simply means the restoration of proper relationships between people, the forces of nature, and the spirit that conveys the Genesis ideal, all of which will be cultivated in the restoration villages to reflect values arising out of a sincere desire to be one with the Creator. In such villages, morality, decency, and proper conduct are promoted by an extended network of Yah-fearing men and women. All wealth generated within the village will be communally shared according to agreed upon guidelines. Healthy desires for pleasure and inspirational public performance will provide the basis for life-supporting creativity.
So that we may be in glory as the holy.
Instead of the insidious, frivolous, and destructive entertainment which now has the world out of balance. Our objective is for the village to be self-sustaining, utilizing the crafts and skills of the residents to create industry. Sustainable organic agriculture will be a major component of village industry, providing both food and fuel. All of the village's human, animal, and plant waste will be composted into organic matter for recycling back into the soil to promote and maintain its fertility. When considering the question of economic development and investment, we must be very selective of the types of products we desire to manufacture and make abundantly available to the populace. For essential industry, let us consider the areas of food, shelter, clothing, and institutions. Where food is concerned, we can easily supply our population with fresh fruit, vegetables, legumes, and whole grain throughout the year. In this area, the essential industries would include the milling of our grains, husking of our rice, etc. Reasonable mechanization would be required for the cleaning, sorting, and packaging of produce for shipping. And perhaps the canning or jarring of the few items not available throughout the year, but for which it has been determined that they are desired or required during the off-season. It should be the same in our building and clothing industries. We should seek to establish industry to complement and supply products wherefrom we become locally self-sufficient. The concern is that during the initial stages of development, we not steer far away from vertically integrated economic development, such as projects in which the success depends on no outside sources, just the mobility and energy of those the project seeks to serve. The village's health care will be promoted by their understanding of life management, or is what we will refer to as health literacy, life management principles, and reinforced by low-stress living, contentment, life-giving foods, and yaw-centered spirituality. Each village's healthcare center will bring medical services and information closer to the rural population, saving lives and alleviating suffering, the impact of which will be most immediately realized through facilitating simpler access to the village's birthing facility, which will mitigate or reduce to a minimum the problems that result from prenatal or childbirth-related causes. In addition, utilizing well-developed indigenous knowledge and truth science, harmonized with the Creator, will end all unnecessary suffering resulting from alien-imposed knowledge, worldviews, and clever but life-threatening technology. We realize that many of the things being promoted by the Western world sound progressive and beneficial. Nevertheless, they are designed strictly for the purpose of more tightly integrating the people of Africa into their world economy and monetary system, and subsequently under their material control. The purpose is to bring about a greater dependence of thinking processes, systems, and technologies that are controlled by those in opposition to divine order. Inherent in the design of modern society are mechanisms that facilitate the process of dominion, domination, and control, strictly for advancing the objectives of the oppressors. Contemporary Western education only prepares you to be put into service on their behalf. The understanding gained by logical thinking using the your mind makes evident the intrinsic character of the prevalent ungodly cultural offspring born of an alien conceptualization of the earth. This conceptualization alienates us from the Genesis idea, or the your mind. Little effort is required to see the obvious results of a deceptive progress. The modern way of life has been disastrous for the people and the earth itself. Possibly, we may conclude that it is really a blessing that Africa has not been heavily contaminated with this mindset. When it is so obvious, why have we not concluded that planting the seeds of Western society will only grow to manifest the same kinds of patterns of discord and strife? Truthfully, the economic policies of the so-called advanced nations and corporations of today are failing to serve the essential needs of society for human dignity and oneness with God. For the developing African nation that is earnestly seeking a better way, none of the existing models can help. In testimony to this legacy of failure, the following excerpt from Newsweek sheds light on the World Bank's dismal record of failure in Africa.
Nowhere is better judgment needed than in Africa, the only region in an increasingly privatized world where the bank still commands a central financing and policy role. After a decade of following World Bank advice, living standards in Africa have fallen by 2% annually. Unemployment has quadrupled to 100 million, and real wages have plunged by a third. Across Africa, projects funded by the World Bank have become synonymous with financial mismanagement, environmental degradation, displacement of vulnerable populations, and corruption. "50 years after the bank began lending out a total of $350 billion for some 6,000 projects, it is finally raising the question of whether such projects work."
The pursuit of money and materialism have become so important that social, environmental, and spiritual consequences no longer seem to matter. Gone is the concern for collective well-being. And while they are loath to admit it, the advanced industrial nations begrudgingly have to face their inability to stop the decline. Perhaps Norman Lear, noted American writer and television producer, said it best in a 1993 article entitled "Tender Truth," when he wrote, "The truth is that living by the numbers is not a happy way to live one's life." Let's face it, America is not a nation enjoying its material success, and it should be obvious by now that a higher GNP, a faster computer chip, and interactive televisions with 500 channels are not going to address the hole in America's heart, a direct result of the spiritual poverty of our time, end quote. Vanishing jobs and the fear of unemployment have transformed workers in industrialized nations into virtual slaves to a constantly shifting job market. They are working harder, performing even more tasks, and consequently are more anxious and less satisfied with their lives overall. Before you get the impression that I am totally opposed to the use of any technology, let me state that that is not the case. The concern I am expressing is that the pursuit of money and materialism has produced a distorted thinking process in man, with no regard for the obvious natural laws of limitations. There are limits that men cannot ignore and remain in harmony with the life cycles of Almighty God. Initially, technology was to be a great savings, giving us more and costing us less. We must now consider the end result of applied technology and what it truthfully has cost us. What we have paid with our ecosystems and the value lost on our human resources. The countries pushing high tech have made abundant human resources the Earth's major problem. Subsequently, they are looking for solutions to overpopulation instead of overdevelopment. Obviously, I view the problem as being too many machines performing jobs, or better stated, taking the jobs once done by people. What benefit is it to develop a social system that employs unlimited machinery and leaves people idle and homeless? Who would downgrade the value and need for a people in such a way? And why would they? Are we being snared in a mindset of development suicide that compels us to see the great human resources as a disposable burden? Enlightened governments must now demonstrate bold leadership and seize the power to define the role of business under its authority. Governments must accept the responsibility to emphasize to the individual by way of education and the corporation by way of standards of accountability that employment and business are functions of national service and exist not just for their personal gain. Every undertaking must be measured according to this principle. Again, we're not ignoring the income-earning functions of business and labor. These are pragmatic considerations as well, which have not been lacking as men have been doing business and making money for centuries. Yet, they have not included in their quarterly reports or State of the Union reviews the kind of spiritual evaluation that will make sacred the workplace, align the corporation, and protect the nation. Their statement demonstrates that men clearly see the problem, but are unable to avoid it. They are trapped, and I repeat, they are trapped in a world of competition, and it is beyond their ability to free themselves. Governments not only have the right, but also the responsibility to question the positive or negative impact of an enterprise. If this responsibility had been exercised in the past, would we have businesses such as the tobacco industry? With government permission and subsidy, this evil industry manufactures and markets a product responsible for the death of 425,000 Americans and millions of others worldwide annually. Make no mistake, the earth cannot stand for China, India, South America, and Africa to become replicas of America and Europe. There would be no clean air, water, or land left anywhere, nor mineral resources. All of humanity and all of the ecosystems would be overwhelmed by waste. Much is being written about this crisis. To achieve the objectives we are striving for, the principles, rhythms, vibrations, and cycles, set times of divine order must guide everything we do. Remember, the ends are not separate from the means. The process we use to accomplish something will characterize the result. We must encourage the restoration of faith to believe that another direction for science, a less destructive kind of technology, a fair system of labor and management, and a truly progressive development can be rediscovered, rekindled, and applied. We must believe that a different kind of social order and lifestyle can be developed, which is effective, comfortable, and satisfying. Science and technology, realigned with truth, will become much more elaborate and interesting in our pursuit of life. But its intrinsic nature will remain interconnected with the divine order of the creation, and subsequently far less prone to being exploited and put into the service of the forces of chaos, discord, and individualism. We acknowledge and verify that there is a divine order for man and the universe, which was initially breathed into Adam as his breath of life. In the Adamic African worldview, truth, science, and spirituality are unified in a system of knowledge that provides guidance for the Adamic civilization, how to protect, balance, enhance, and move in harmony with the earth's beauty. The objective of evil is to, in some way, convince you not to subordinate yourself to that order, and even that there are no consequences for failure to do so. The objective of our effort is to build modern communal villages throughout the interior that will serve as both model and training grounds for all men and women desiring to restore heaven on earth. I call it getting to heaven alive. Our indigenous local African family will provide the human resources, joined by those in the diaspora who are committed to the fulfillment of a similar vision for the restoration of the Adamic civilization. Africans of the diaspora would greatly benefit for the village during visits, vacations, and apprenticeships, being assisted in the casting off of the binding, blinding Western mentality and acclimatizing themselves to righteous living. Thereafter, they could join the village or proceed to build new ones. The truth is that in any African country where there is relative peace, I have found more genuine happiness than I have found among Africans vainly trying to fit into the cities of America and Europe. Among our brothers and sisters living in the diaspora, there is persistent anxiety and stress fueled by racism, socio-economic inequality, and the nagging desire for more material wealth. On the contrary, life in our own land is made sacred by our family values and willingness to share. Continental Africans would also visit, vacation, and apprentice at these villages to learn skills and access bountiful internal resources that will facilitate their going back to their own villages and transforming them into vital, life-promoting places. Soon, if not already, providing atmospheres conducive to clear and creative thinking will become the most sought-after service industry on the planet. More and more people are in search of and in need of a break from the trauma of trying to survive in an anti-life environment. I am speaking of much more than a resort or retreat in the traditional sense. It is recommended that we build an ecologically compatible spiritual advance. Note, not retreat, spiritual advance, where people may come to rest and think. A 7-star environment instead of a 5-star hotel. Those in control of this world need time to rethink the present trends and the policies responsible for them. They need a break from themselves. Africa should develop and promote spiritual advances where no animals or animal byproducts are served. There will be no stealing, no prostitutes or immodest dress, no negative television, lewd video, vulgar music, or provocative dancing. Properly developed, we can make the African Edenic environment the most desirable in the world. These advances would be spiritual sanctuaries, providing respite for peace of mind, body, and soul. Tenants would be invited to participate in the planting or harvesting of foods as a natural experience of the presence and power of God. There will be communal dining at least once a day and healthful recreation to reacquaint residents with the joy and energy that come from interacting with people of like mind. No alcoholic beverages other than naturally fermented wine will be available. In addition to comfortable accommodation, these beautiful, serene rooms will inspire prayer and meditation. Let us show the beauty of what we have as men return to the cradle of civilization for inspiration to return to the Genesis idea as we share with them a new beginning. A major social goal is to assist African nations and governments which are faced with the real population problem, a massive and overwhelming migration from the villages and the countrysides to the overcrowded slums of the cities. Usually, the youth leave the countryside for two reasons. One is that they cannot make a living which will allow them to attain many essentials. Another reason is their susceptibility to the attractions, deceptive attractions I may add, of a Western lifestyle proliferating in the cities. Hence, undertaking a program of stabilizing the hemorrhaging from the villages while simultaneously restoring their health and vitality is of utmost importance for African governments. The problems of burgeoning cities are not unlikely to be solved in the near future. Therefore, the prudent course of action is to address the problem at its source. Successful village development will ease the burden on African governments by providing an organic agricultural extension which will greatly enhance the nutritive food intake of their people, while also providing the villagers with livelihoods. The restoration of morality by reviving traditional values while providing engaging life-generating activities will greatly assist African governments in their ultimate objective of reviving African glory. The African Restoration Village becomes an associate institution being promoted as a living and learning center. It does not follow the Western model of individualism. The Restoration Village will consist of, but not be limited to, the teaching of specific professions and arts such as sustainable agriculture, preventive health care, metalworking, weaving, furniture making, soya product manufacturing, ceramics, and basket making. All such professions will be rooted in an understanding of the spirit of nature and its natural ecology. In effect, it will constitute dedicating the individual to the eternal life cycles of the Creator. If we are to be successful in our efforts to restore balance to humanity and the planet, we must institutionalize our struggle. Doing so demonstrates a high level of seriousness, tenacity, and vision. In the future, it is recommended that we establish a small accredited ecology and nature (ENN) institute or university for an enrollment of 60 to 90 students. This institution will teach the required university courses, yet it will specialize in ecology and nature courses as the major for all enrolled students, causing the students to become more sensitive to their physical and spiritual needs and their relationship to the environment. We prefer to have a small, highly sought-after institution in the initial stage for minimizing management, monitoring, and budgetary concerns. Since ecology and nature comprise such a vast arena, the graduate students are certain to be multifaceted masters of several disciplines. This institution will inspire governments to create jobs for its graduates. The jobs for ENN graduates will aid in creating a human shield around the country's ecosystem that will by far supersede the value of salaries. In addition, their presence will stimulate further and continuous dialogue on the subject, which shall broaden the national consciousness and interest. Thereafter, as additional individuals, entities, and countries acquire an increased level of ENN interest and understanding, they too will enlist in the struggle. More than likely, they will be inspired to contribute and/or experiment with similar ideas. This could project Africa into the forefront of the struggle to save Mother Earth. This new sense of pride could become the catalyst to foster homegrown solutions to many other problems besetting the continent. Understandably, one of the biggest impediments to the sons and daughters of Africa ushering in the new age of heaven on earth is the necessity under current influences to obtain income in some form of currency in order to provide many basic necessities. Initially, to some extent, it may be necessary to operate with the global monetary system to accomplish many important tasks. Key to our success would be our resistance to the trend toward the deification of money and materialism. Nevertheless, the village will strive for self-sufficiency and independence from the global market economy. Fundamentally, this will prevent being in the position of serving the global market economy rather than focusing more towards serving our internal needs. This is a necessity because its record clearly demonstrates that the global market economy is not designed to serve the needs of the masses. The European colonizers and more recently the development partners have long-range, far-reaching plans. What they deem as being in Europe's best interests are simply not in Africa's best interests. The plan of European powers historically is to develop conditions favorable for the continued exploitation and economic dependency of Africa. Subsequently, economic policies are formulated elsewhere and dumped on African countries, a process that they have no control over. This is why all of their development plans for Africa, even the nice-sounding progressive ones, must be carefully scrutinized. Though some may believe they are introducing modern development in medical care for humanitarian reasons, the end result is all too often the exploitation of a laboring populations of Africans, a population increasingly divorced from their cultural practices and thus their sense of themselves serving European interests. Overt exploitation is thusly concealed behind rhetoric and mechanisms that are increasingly more subtle and difficult to identify. These policies ostensibly promote economic development, but the primary objective is the development of African people in a manner contrary to their nature via the imposition of a culture that will completely destroy the African image. They give us the economic incentive to encourage our partnership in the destruction of African consciousness society. The restoration village is not what is commonly recommended for or thought of as African development, for the primary reasons of being focused on the rural areas and creator-centered. The early stages of developing the restoration village, the government or local authorities should grant the use of the land without rent and with reasonable assurances of indefinite tenure. In exchange, the land would be made productive and the people of the surrounding areas would draw on it as a resource for learning how to transform their villages and lands into productive, self-sufficient societies. These living and learning centers would show by example how to live successfully without massive expenditures, which are usually beyond the means of overburdened national budgets. Everyone who comes to learn at the restoration villages will return to where they live and strive to replicate the whole model. Or they may only take back with them certain skills and aspects that could help them in their current context. In addition, the restoration village will be a major benefit for farming techniques and basic agri-technology skills that will boost food production and human resource productivity of the community and the nation in ways coinciding with the objectives of African governance. The objective of the Restoration Village vision is to make a success out of what we Africans have and control. Africa's greatest wealth is its human resources. We must protect them, develop them, and structure production to reflect their needs. With proper planning and excess of income over consumption expenditures will result from growing our own food, making our own clothing, and providing other necessities of daily life directly with our labors. Income will also be generated by marketing produce and products and the establishment of service industries and apprenticeships. Africa has the largest concentration of people not directly in contact with or directly affected by the ravages of modern science and Western technology. Upward of 90% of Africa's population south of the Sahara have had very little contact with modernity beyond the automobile and recently the cell phone. In areas such as these, our people will recognize, appreciate, and respond to the advancement brought about through simplicity and modesty. Villages will build physical strength as nutrition improves and moral strength to effectively challenge and overcome lust and greed. Key components of the village restoration plan are: 1. To promote research and development of the underutilized reservoir of indigenous knowledge, systems, science, and technologies, methods for the restoration of sustainable and viable African communities. Indigenous pharmacological science, IPS. IPS will provide the basis for sustainable development and expansion of natural plant-based preparations for treatment and eradication of sickness and disease. In addition, IPS will be instrumental in synthesizing herbal plant nutritional supplements. Indigenous agri-systems will be instrumental in reintroducing a variety of highly nutritional, ecological, adaptable, and high-yielding indigenous food crops. These food crops could play a key role in ameliorating the problem of hunger, malnutrition, and food security. Indigenous nutritional science should be developed and expanded in conjunction with indigenous agri-systems. The interfacing of these two systems will result in the creation of food products and beverages of exceptional nutritional value. These products will aid in the correction and prevention of nutritional deficiencies prevalent in many African countries. 2. To function as research centers and seed repositories. Seeds will be saved, replanted, and developed. In addition, the villages are to serve as living laboratories to rediscover, test, and develop native and ancient species and varieties of food, fiber, and healing crops, and thereafter teach how they can best be reintroduced into the current context. Growing native species of crops is extremely important for maintaining biodiversity, which benefits the soil, natural ecology, and agricultural productivity. The native crops are diverse, strong, drought-resistant, have medicinal uses, and carry with them a wealth of knowledge. To research indigenous African botanical science and develop biophyto-derived formulations from indigenous African flora. These preparations will be used to control, prevent crop diseases and pests. There are an abundance of tree plants, neem, papaya, that when properly formulated are highly effective controls for use in agriculture. 4. To expand water harvesting, purification, and sanitation methods. The accessibility of clean and adequate water resources is key to productive, health, and sustainable African communities. Therefore, we must devise practical ways and means to develop water collection and water storage systems. Simple collection systems for harvesting rainwater runoff, home storage water systems, underground village storage tanks, and manually constructed catchment ponds are encouraging examples of what can be constructed using locally available resources. Purification and sanitizing of water can be accomplished by using biophytocoagulants and disinfectants. Specific indigenous plants, trees, have properties which remove impurities from water and sanitize, disinfect drinking supplies. The seeds of the African moringa tree is a noted example. Therefore, we will draw focused attention on researching and developing this area. Consider the book of Exodus, the 15th chapter, verses 22 through 25.
So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness, and found no water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord shewed him a tree, which when he had cast into the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved them.
Solar water disinfection, slow sand and gravel filtration are additional means to purify and disinfect water for potable use. 5. To promote soil fertility via the utilization of ancient practices. Since man is formed from the dust of the earth, the soil will be of significant importance. The wisdom of the Bible reminds us that the land must lie fallow every 7th year to preserve its strength.
And the Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field, nor prune thy vineyard.
This practice obviously influences life, living, and good health. Subsequently, it is of critical importance how we feed and treat the soil during the 6 years of use. A key component of maintaining the health of the soil during the years that it is being worked is returning to it the nutrients that it yields and which subsequently pass through our bodies. These must ultimately be returned to the soil in the form of compost, along with other organic matter. 6. To function around divine order and an Afrocentric value system. We will utilize truth-centered science and indigenous knowledge systems. Also, other technologies and methods that are compatible with the objective. The villages will become known as living and learning centers that pursue holistic research and utilize methods of teaching integrated with daily life, an antithesis of chaos, discord, disharmony. Instead of individualism, there will be a natural social ecology. One of the major objectives is to halt the advance of sickness and death in the country and thereafter provide light for the entire continent. 7. To integrate tree husbandry for food and fuel is a key component of the village restoration plan. Again, I go to the Bible, the book of Deuteronomy, the 20th chapter, and the 19th verse.
When thou shalt besiege a city a long time, in making war against it to take it, thou shalt not destroy the trees thereof by forcing an axe against them, for thou mayest eat of them, and thou shalt not cut them down. For the tree of the field is man's life, to employ them in the siege.
We may discern from this verse that the tree, complemented by the field crops, herbs of the field, was intended to be the primary source of man's food. Man has long forgotten that the tree is the staff of life, not wheat. It was the fall of man from the Genesis ideal that caused him to resort to animal husbandry. Prior to his fall, human life was primarily sustained by the tree. Thus, it is not coincidental that a major focus and thrust of our ecological struggle concerns trees. Our struggle for the trees is our struggle for the life of man on the planet. Just as the tree was an integral part of the former Genesis, so must it be in our new ecological Genesis. Foods grown on trees provide protein, essential amino acids, milk for children and adults, and all other vitamins and minerals required to maintain a perfectly healthy body and mind. In addition to that, they increase the oxygen content of the air, reduce greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, draw the rain, and prevent soil erosion, while requiring less fertilizer, if at all, and minimal care. In addition, trees will yield their produce for generations. Therefore, we should strengthen existing tree husbandry by planting 1,000 acres of various selected trees for food and fuel. To coincide with this planting, we should sponsor a comprehensive course on trees, the staff of life. This will have many benefits and positive ramifications that shall positively enhance the ecological process. For instance, it can eventually change the status of animal husbandry, which consumes the majority of the grains grown and water used. We also note that the leaves of the tree are to be used for medicine for the air, for the soil, and for man.
And by the river upon its bank, on this side and on that side, shall grow all trees for food, whose leaf shall not fade, neither shall its fruit be consumed. It shall bring forth new fruit according to its months, because their waters issued out of the sanctuary, and its fruit shall be for food, and its leaf for medicine.
And in closing, to all of you, the fate of an individual or a nation will always be determined by the degree of his or its harmony with the forces and laws of nature. And never forget that. Allow me to repeat that. The fate of an individual or a nation will always be determined by the degree of his or its harmony with the forces and laws of nature. The fullness of life depends upon a harmonious relationship with the natural laws. You must feel your kinship with the earth and once again move to protect it from abuse. You must develop a sense of oneness with your environment and realize your dependence upon it. Thereafter, your growing respect for the earth will prevent and check further its destruction. Stella.